So, welcome to another Ideas That Matters conversation. We're here on site for once rather than doing this via Zoom. And I'm here with my colleague and friend, Todd Kraiss, who is, what is actually your position here at the Kacmarcik Center for Human Development?
Yeah, so here we call it the K-chip because all those words.
Yeah, it is a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. So I'm the performance and coaching leader.
Okay.
So I'm in charge of bringing coaching, whether it be like Clifton Strengths or just general life coaching, career coaching, to the Kacmarcik Center companies.
And now you're also a graduate student, as we were talking about in previous conversations and just a minute ago, working on a dissertation that has very interesting scope, and maybe you want to say a little bit about that. You're doing this with Concordia right down the road from here.
Yeah.
And it has to do with coaching, it has to do with businesses, which people, I think they think right off the bat, oh, it's going to be executive leadership coaching. But you're more interested in what do you do for the ordinary employee? And how does that affect their performance, retention, happiness with their job? And we should, we'll talk later about why businesses should care about that sort of thing, because I think maybe some people think they don't. But let's start by talking about your dissertation work, the stuff that you're obviously quite excited about, interested in, and if you're at, the stage of the dissertation, probably also, frustrated with and bedeviled by and wondering what the hell's going on with this.
Yes, thank you for that, because I really am. It's those three letters, ABD.
Yeah.
It's those letters that nobody wants to say or hear, but that's me. Through Concordia, it's the Lychee program. But what I really want to do, because I'm starting from scratch with a coaching program with the Kacmarcik Center and all of Mr. Kacmarcik's companies, I want to see what coaching, specifically like Clifton Strengths or positive psychology or things like that, how can that retain employees? And we can talk about the leadership side, but I'm really looking at the manufacturing floor and if that can be effective. Just because there is a hierarchy, and a lot of times when people are leaving, it's them. It's a stepping stone job. How can coaching, how can this make their job, make them happier to be there?
So in some cases, the coaching could include, this is time for this to be a stepping stone for you, right? You're going to move up either within the organization and maybe move into management or a higher level position of some sort, quality management or something like that. But in a lot of cases, it's to help the employee fit in better within their workplace. So what are some examples of issues that an employee might bring that coaching would actually help out with?
That's a great question. Coaching, first of all, just the fine line. What I tell people when I'm coaching them one-on-one, when I have that, first of all, it's really important. I tell them this is Vegas. So what happens in this room stays in this room. There's a confidentiality, but not like the client therapist.
Right.
So there's that fine line that I have to recognize when coaching has moved into, listen, we have other resources I can give you, which sometimes happens. But what I think coaching can do for them, and for instance, like we have in our backdrop here, it can give them, like Clifton Strengths, people are leaving because unhappiness with management, unhappiness with their job. It can be very just 10 hours a day of the same thing, really, really monotonous. But what you can do is give them, hey, if we can put you in positions of success, like Clifton Strengths can, if we can give your leader your top 5 strengths and go, if so-and-so really were using these strengths in their job in one way, shape, or form, engagement will go up. Gallup has done research on that. Their happiness could as well.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. Before COVID, it was estimated, and I don't remember exactly where I read this, but it tracks that about 40% of the American workforce were considered disengaged. They didn't care a rat's behind about their job.
Yeah.
And they were just showing up to get a paycheck, and maybe not even for that some of the time. We don't really know the full numbers, but it does seem like it's a significant problem in today's workforce. So in a way, you could say there's like an ethical dimension to this. There's a practical bottom line profit dimension to this. There's, epistemological dimensions, knowing about yourself, knowing about who you're managing. So actually, let's start with that. Like, why, you could say, a person's a manager or a director. Why should they care about the strengths or weaknesses or temperament, or pick whatever other qualifiers we want of their employees? It's just a matter of like fitting cogs into the right spots and having the wheels turn, right? What's wrong with that idea?
Well, one thing, and I don't have any numbers per se, specific numbers, but whenever you have turnover, whenever you have somebody leave, there is a number that it costs the company to retrain, rehire. Yeah. It's tens of thousands of dollars. I know that much to get another person in. So right there, you wasted the company's money. But
yeah.
I think you have a duty as a manager to just make sure. You are a caretaker, if you will, of these employees. Yeah, they have to make the thingamawatches and the thingamabobs, and they have to do what they have to do.
Yeah.
But you can do it in a way where they felt like they matter, because sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
So why not pay attention to one aspect of them, so that when they come in and you go, "Hey, how was your weekend?" and you know that this employee has empathy in their top 5 strengths. If you play to that, even if it's not your strength, that's like a bonus for you.
Yeah, so that's tying into the ethical dimension, and it is the Center for Human Performance, right?
Yes,
and so performance isn't just about how much do you produce or how much profit do you generate, but how we relate to each other as well, and the satisfaction people take in their work. So let's come back to your dissertation.
Yeah.
What are you studying?
Man, as I know we've discussed before, it's just been, there's so much out there, but trying to find that search string that equals manufacturing and happiness, and using, if you will, psychological principles or assessments like Meyers-Brigg or this or DISC or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just finding that, because I really want to concentrate on the manufacturing side, because as far as Mr. Kacmarcik's companies, Capco is the largest, and it really is the one that needs this the most. 600 plus employees, maybe 500 to 600, and so I wanted to do something, since I work for that part anyway. I wanted something as my dissertation to help the company. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, you always have to have data. Well, here's my backyard. I'm going to have data once this kicks off. I'll have hopefully good data as I collect, surveys, as we're going to give surveys to people who, to all of the employees, because not a lot of people know what coaching is or what that does for them. They think football coach, basketball coach.
Yeah, or they think life coach. Right?
Or they think life coach, yes.
I've got like emotional problems, my relationships aren't great, I'm having trouble managing stress, or I lost my job and now I got to figure out what I'm going to do about that. But I think a lot of people don't think about it as something that you would do within the workplace, and not to produce radical change, but to make sure that things go better, like an ongoing process. And you could say the same thing about therapy. Why do people go to therapists? Sometimes it's because it's court ordered, right? That's the
There's that aspect, yeah.
And then, sometimes it's, there's a crisis in my life and I've got to fix this sort of thing. But you could go to a therapist just the same way as you go to have your car tuned up every once in a while before problems occur.
Yes.
And so coaching has that aspect, right? And not that you don't have any acute problems within the workplace. A conflict arises between employees or in the management team or something like that. So when the way you're setting up this, you're doing research, empirical research. You're having coaching going on within a workplace. You're looking at what other people have done with other inventories, measures, approaches, trying to I mean, it's difficult to compare. Like, what do you do with comparing Clifton Strengths to Meyers-Briggs? It's not like you could translate that back and forth.
Yes, yeah.
But, and you're using, I think, if I understand you right, you're using retention as one main metric, but you're using other metrics like employee satisfaction or things like that too, right?
Yes, yeah. Retention, you're right, is just one metric I want to see, but it is about, human flourishing.
Yeah.
That word is being, thrown out, or that phrase.
It is a buzzword
so
these
often.
days. Yeah.
It's like, Harvard has their flourishing, section of their school, of Harvard's college.
Public health, yeah.
Yeah, so it's out there, but that's really what it is. It's how do you flourish in what people might be considered a very dirty, hard-working environment in the factory setting.
Yeah.
You can still flourish. You can still make a career out of this. And what I want to do is, can coaching and can learning more about yourself and your leadership know about who they lead, can that help in those measures?
It's interesting. The idea of like it being a hard, dirty environment. People have all sorts of stereotypes about people who work in manufacturing, and I think there is. You're right. You're going to be working if you're doing any sort of fabrication. Things are going to be messy.
Yeah.
It may not be dusty. Might be that there's glue involved. It might be whatever, right? And whatever clothes you come in with, you're going to sweat. You're going to have schmutz on it by the time that you get out. But there's an incredible range of people. I mean, I come from a blue collar family. I think if I remember right, you do sort of as well. So that it's not just like guys with their lunchbox and their coveralls, with the little bell ringing, and they all shuffle in, and they're all kind of tough guys or something like that. There's men and women in the workplace. There's people of all sorts of backgrounds who choose to work in manufacturing, in part because it pays well, right? And so that range of diversity, does coaching help out? Because whenever you have diversity, which we typically talk about as a good thing, there are always frictions. There's always conflicts, differences in the way people see things. So I'll follow this up. Whether it's Myers-Briggs or Clifton Strengths or the DISC profile, which I actually like quite a bit, I mentioned to you that really helped me and my wife figure out our approaches to each other, because she was a complete D. I'm more spread out.
Okay.
So we've got diversity in the sense that we typically think about in the workplace: race, class, gender, national background, languages people speak, stuff like that, age as well.
Yes, yeah.
But there's great diversity in these that's revealed through these inventories that people take that have to do with, what do you call it? Their makeup, their personality.
Yeah, I like to call it just a peephole glimpse into who they are.
Okay.
What I always start my workshops with, when I do I just did one yesterday, a Clifton Strengths workshop, is please don't take this as this is who I am and that is it. I said this is an aspect.
You don't want it reductive.
Yeah, exactly. This is an aspect of you. And this is part of you. This is somebody, or this is something that you will use not only at work, in the grocery store, at church, or whatever domain you're in.
Yeah.
This is who you are. These are your strengths and what you're good at. And to put yourself in areas of success, let's use what we're already good at.
Yeah.
But I always say, you still are a lot more. Humans are so complex. You're a lot more than the Clifton Strengths assessment results. Myers-Briggs or DISC. It's just fun and interesting to see yourself. Like for myself, I am empathy, positivity, woo, includer, and communication. So what does that tell you? That tells you I love talking to people. That tells you I'm positive all the time.
You're not just going to be the librarian in the back,
no.
stuff away.
Yeah, exactly. And what's great about this as well, here's a real life story about myself. I was in IT for 25 years.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I just knew who I was as far as this bubbly, positive guy who just loves meeting new people. And IT sometimes was lonely.
Yeah.
And you can't talk. I mean, now that we have AI, I still can't talk to things like I want to. So this has come across at my age as a new career change, this coaching and this Clifton Strengths inventory and positive psychology and all this. I have a master's degree in educational psychology and always liked that aspect of life. However, I just couldn't bring myself to go to become a counselor because of the things you have to leave at work and the things that you couldn't take home with you because I just don't think I could handle it. So I had to tell myself that.
That's true, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier, or touched on it. There is a big difference between coaching and psychotherapy, psychological counseling, psychoanalysis, whatever we want to place in there. Psychoanalysis, you also got to become an MD as well.
Yeah.
So that's, starting to wane considerably. But, it's not, there are some similarities, right?
Yeah.
You're working with the psyche, the person's, more than just their mind, their feelings, their affects, their desires, their drives. And there is that aspect of confidentiality as well.
Yes.
So how else is psychotherapy different than coaching? You mentioned you can bring your work home. If you're a psychotherapist, really technically you're only supposed to be speaking with other psychotherapists about your clients, right? You're not supposed to be bouncing ideas off your spouse.
No,
right?
But
you can do that as a coach, right?
Yeah. Pretty much. It really is sand, because the line can move and it can be based upon even your experience. I mean, I've gone to therapy before just because I like you had touched on. I truly believe it's like an oil change.
Yeah.
Now, there's times when you need it because your engine has just blown a gasket. So you really marriage, your life, whatever. But I really do appreciate the fact that you can just go see them because you want to get something off your chest and you want to talk things through. But like you said, where is that line? And so for me, I've always discussed that because life coach, you touched on that. Life coach, you could touch on a marriage. You could touch on maybe I have difficulties with my anger. But I think for me, I'm able to ask questions and talk about those things. But if it starts to be in that realm, I may offer suggestions. Right? But then, like here at the Kacmarcik Center or in the Kacmarcik enterprise of companies, we have an EAP benefit. So we will also have a one sheet. And after a session like that, wherever we end, I'll say, listen, love talking about this stuff. I'm not a licensed professional. I really would love for you to talk to somebody more about this. Happy to still go down certain avenues, but I think this would actually help you more with your marriage or your addiction or whatever might be happening. Yeah,
referrals are pretty important. I mean, I'm a certified philosophical counselor.
Okay.
We have the same sort of issue. We're not psychotherapists. It's not a medical intervention. Right. And referring people is very important because I do have some people who come to me and I'm like, listen, I don't think I'm going to help you with this aspect of it. You do need to go see a psychotherapist about this.
Yes.
But, so I was, as you were talking, I was thinking this distinction between coaching and psychotherapy, do you find when you're meeting with workers that maybe they don't get that distinction and they're thinking that you are going to be doing psychotherapy with them, and there's still a stigma out there that psychotherapy is for people who have real problems or are weak or something like that. Do you get that at all where they're like, I don't know if I want to do this coaching thing with you because I don't need a shrink,
That's a great question. So as we're kicking this off and as we've talked to people about it, we've decided along with the marketing team that is here at Capco, we've decided to really have some marketing flyers and videos specifically pointing out, and even a survey.
So create an environment.
Create an environment of what coaching is and what coaching is not. And dead set on this, it's not going to be required. But here's what the benefits are if you decide to go after it. Now, it's looking at people and giving them a plan for their Capco journey, which could include coaching. Like, let's say you do want to go from the floor and become a leader, and you've never had a leadership position. there might be suggested, listen, why don't you go get some, you might want to try some coaching. They might be able to help you. What is your leadership style? What do you think about leading others? Did you ever think about it? Or you think it's just going to be like babysitting? There's all these things, all these questions that they have about coaching, because I think it's new for a lot of people and a lot of them. So it's, you're right. We really want to have material that, as best as possible, shares with them there is a difference between going to a counselor or a therapist and going to see a coach.
So with that, you mentioned that like the marketing team isn't on that, which makes great sense. Is mentoring part of that? Because I mean, in a lot of companies, there's already like a mentoring process, sometimes formally, sometimes just informally in place. Did you with the coaching, are you like, well, we should talk with the people who are going to be mentors so they can be better mentors, or maybe some people shouldn't be mentors for these kinds of people over here because there's too big of a disconnect?
Great question. We want to also include mentoring in this.
Okay.
The coaching side will come first, but then it's really just seeing who steps in, if you will. It's the froth that comes to the top. I love a good beer, so it's a froth that comes to the top. That who do we see as somebody that can be that mentor for the next wave, and other things that we're doing here at the Kacmarcik Center. We have an impact program here.
Now, what is that?
So the impact program, it lasts for a year, and we have great learning opportunities. So once every month or two, this group of employees from Capo come in here, and they're going to have a session on DISC. They're going to have a session on conflict management. They'll have a session on Clifton Strengths. They'll have a workshop, and they're full long day workshops about all of this stuff. How to market yourself, how to brand, how to self-brand. It's just giving people some tools to then make an impact, whether it be here at Capco or at their, like I said, church, grocery store, whatever they are. So there's that. There's going to be a leadership program as well. That's going to be 6 months to a year that we're going to, and it's going to be based upon leadership and what they might need to become better leaders. There'll be an executive side as well.
So we've mentioned, or we've referenced a lot, Clifton Strengths.
Yes.
Meyers-Brigg, DISC. For those who don't know about what those are, and it's just jargon to them, they probably got a little sense about, these are, we could call them personality assessments, inventories, things like that. This is your stock and trade. Can you explain for people what the difference between these are and what the strengths of each of these approaches are? And if there's any other that you particularly like or think is interesting, because there's tons of them out there. Right?
There really are, and you really could water down. I mean, somebody like me, I love taking them all and just seeing where I fit in everything. But sometimes people could look at that, and for instance, I'll just say Clifton Strengths. They don't want 16-year-olds to college to take the full 34 inventory.
I didn't know that.
They actually have a version for 16 and older. And it gives them not necessarily strengths as far as these read out.
Yeah.
It gives them, because of who you are or what you came out with the assessment, how do you study better? How do you go through life as a high school and a freshman, sophomore, college student better? It gives them that. And I believe and Gallup might have a little bit different take on this, but you really never want to pigeonhole somebody to think this assessment is who I am.
Yeah.
Because life, again, humans are more, there's more complexity to the human being than just an assessment.
I think we had quite a lot of that back when we were younger, because we're of a different generation.
Yes, yeah.
When it came to like high school, I remember taking inventories, and it was supposed to figure out like what you would actually be well suited for.
Yes, I remember that.
Some of the answers, some of the answers were like really off the wall, and be like, well, I'd never think about doing that,
Yeah.
And what were they called? They weren't called career counselors at the time. There were something counselors.
Okay, yeah, I
You
remember
wouldn't
that.
meet with them very often,
No.
right? Nowadays you meet with them quite frequently,
Yes.
and they'd be like, "All right, we got you pegged. You need to go do this."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that reductive approach, I think that's one of the fears a lot of people have about inventories, that if they take something like this, now either they'll know their secret destiny,
Yeah.
or if they're doing it in the workplace, their boss will know it and then put them into here. And I'll tell you sort of a story. I don't know if I ever told you this, and it doesn't have anything to do with personality. It has to do purely with physical attributes. So
Okay.
I ran track in high school. And we had a great coach, really upstanding guy. I learned a lot from him in terms of like what it meant to be a man without being a jerk. But he had a weird quirk, and it was he decided what you were based on your body type, which was kind of the prevalent theory of the time. So if you were built in a certain way, you would be a great pole vaulter. If you were built in a certain, if you're a big guy with lots of muscles, you'll be a shot putter or something like that. And because I was tall and lanky, he decided you're a 440 runner. And I hated the 440 because you take off at a sprint and you last less than a full minute, but your body doesn't really have enough to sprint the whole way, and it feels terrible. And I had to do it twice every meet because I had to do the 440, and then at the end you had the mile relay because we had a small team. And I would say, I think I could be a 800 runner. I could be a good long distance runner. I'd love to do that. He's like, nope, you're a 440 runner. That's what you are. I can just tell by looking at you. And he did let me experiment a little bit with doing the 220, which is just a sprint. And he's like, nope, clearly you're not suited for that. so for the whole time that I was on the team, that's all I got to do. And he did that with other people too. And there were some people who that worked out really well for, and others that it didn't. And I think a lot of people in taking these sorts of things are worried, my boss, now that they know what sort I am, they're going to push me into this cubbyhole and I'm going to be stuck there.
Yeah.
And I'll mention one other thing that comes up in business ethics classes.
Okay.
So usually, business ethics textbooks, they'll do some theory and then they'll have like issues, like sexual harassment in the workplace or sustainability. And one of them that always comes up is autonomy.
Yeah.
So one of the worries that business ethics people have about these sorts of inventories is that, or any sort of psychological test, is that the data will get misused in some way, and it'll be used in ways that reduce the autonomy of the employee. Maybe to divulge, things about them that they wouldn't like divulged, or to say, well, you are suited for this, you're going to do this kind of job, you don't get a chance to grow. So, you clearly, and the center clearly think that's not the way to approach these kind of inventories.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a few ways in which people use these to grow, to prepare, to expand their horizons. How would that work? I mean, let's say we just pick something, like you find out that somebody's
futuristic.
Yeah, I remember us talking about this before, right? So people exceptionally talented are inspired by the future and what could be. They energize others with their visions of the future.
Yeah.
Looking ahead might be called, pie in the sky.
Yeah.
What are you dreaming about? How could that be? Let's say you get tagged with that and you got a boss who's like, well, I don't like that crap. How could that still help you?
Help the employee. Well, I think you hit it. If so, you're saying the boss doesn't like that.
The boss is like, well, that's not very practical.
Yeah. So, and I think, and a lot of times we are told this. I think we need to start with the bosses.
Okay.
So whenever we do a team event or a team workshop, the way we want to do it, of course, logistics doesn't allow us sometimes, is we really want the manager to come in, take the inventory and come in first and have some one-on-one coaching, and we talk to them first.
Okay.
Because we want to prepare them, because they have their own strengths.
And
they must lead with those. But they also must realize that they have a team of, let's just say, 5 individuals, and so there's another 25 top 5 strengths that they have to look at.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you're going to do it perfectly, but what we want to do is we want cohesion in this team. So we start with the manager, we kind of coach them, and then we bring the whole team together, have them take the inventory, show everybody what everybody has, the manager gets to show what he or she has, and then we start with them because they're gonna be the pace setter.
Well,
right?
they're going to be the first point of contact
Yeah.
when people get confused about it, which is inevitable with any sort of robust program.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
And they're not going to become trainers, but they're not going to be just at the level of the employees, right? They're going to be sort of like a little bit more advanced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because we want them to lead with their strengths, but to also know their employees' strengths so that they can also lead by example.
Yeah.
Like again, if they're in the strategic thinking domain and all they do is they're thinking analytically and they just learn and they just want to do this Monday morning, if their employees are all a bunch of relationship builders, if they lead with just their strengths, it's going to be like Monday, like, I've been thinking about this all weekend. We need to do this project this way. And these relationship builders are like, are you going to ask me about my weekend?
Do you, I mean, this is totally off the wall.
Yeah,
but do you think, so there's, both in academia and in business settings, there's a lot of like bad press about meetings that goes back generations. People say, I hate meetings, they're a waste of time. This should have just been an email. I mean, is that part of it? The fact that people who are organizing the meetings come in and they want to do X, and not everybody necessarily wants to do Y. Maybe they also want to do Z and D and stuff like that, but they sure as hell don't want to do X.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this could help to have more productive meetings and then overcome the wrong-headed idea that some people have that meetings are just a complete waste of time. I mean, they're an important part of businesses. Right?
You need them, and I think it's hard to get the perfect meeting to meet everybody's needs. It's just impossible. But I kind of in academia, I a little bit in Concordia, I did teach psychology 101.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where I was not always good at this, but in going through college, going through my bachelor's degree, I always thought about these professors that just would cover a chalkboard from upper left to lower right. And I'm like, great, I took all these notes. Hopefully whatever he said or she said is on the test.
Yeah. And will somehow sink
in all this stuff.
Yeah.
But then you have the people, like I know there are a lot of people that don't like learning styles, if you will. Like I'm a kinesthetic learner or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just think that sometimes if people like oratory learners, they want to listen. They don't want to just read and just take scribbled notes for 18 pages.
Yeah.
Same thing. I think you need to take meetings that way.
I mean, I like that analogy because there was this once learning styles caught on in the educational community, it was way too lockstep. It's like, you're this learner, you're this learner.
Yeah.
Everything has to be designed for everybody to do everything. And then it swung to the other extreme once people were like, oh, learning styles are just complete nonsense. There's nothing to it.
Exactly.
Well, no, it's clear that like different people do favor different things.
Yeah.
Like I like to see things in chart form, like this,
Yeah.
Other people, they like it more loosey-goosey, Some people like it to be very conversational. So it's funny, too, because I did all this, like, faculty development, training, pedagogy stuff. And I remember, it was the era of everything must be active learning, chalk and talk and lecture is dead. So I was like, well, I'll give this a shot. And so I started teaching classes, deliberately doing things that way. And at a certain point, the students are like, when are you going to lecture? We love having discussions and stuff, but you're getting paid because you're supposed to know something about this stuff that we don't know. Are you going to tell us about it? And so you realize there's like a mix that's needed, a kind of prudence about what to apply. Well, let's come back though. So we didn't actually say. So the Clifton Strength approach, what is it? It's got a lot of different moving parts to it.
Yeah. So the basics of it is you take an assessment. You can either take an assessment and it will give you your top 5, or you can take the assessment and it'll give you your top 34. Once it ranks those 34 in order, 1 through 5 are the main focal points, but we like to say 1 through 10.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you are awesome at. You may not even known the words to put to these things, like input. Input is the collection of, is archiving facts and even relationships sometimes to use it at another time. My input's 34.
Okay.
So if I ever had a job
that's not good for working on a dissertation.
This is true, but I have to know myself and go, okay, I have to spend 4 hours using my input.
Yeah.
How can I bring it up to the top just for a little while, and I can just put it away for a while? You're right, it doesn't help very well. So taking that, it's helping people take and go, so my first thing is, whatever you do, if you never remember anything of all this stuff, remember that your top 5 are super important, and you need those in front of you at all times. So I tell people, put it in your Outlook signature.
Okay.
Put it on your LinkedIn profile. Because what people do is they'll come to a workshop like this, and they'll go, this was so great, I learned so much about me. And then they leave, and they're like...
There's no reinforcement.
There's no reinforcement. So I'm like, listen, remember what Gallup said, is that if people that use their top 5 strengths are more engaged at work, and if you don't, and if you don't even remember what they are, how are you going to use them? What's been great is on my LinkedIn profile and on my Outlook signature, I've had people remind me that they're there, because they're like, what are these words?
Oh, interesting.
So I've had people ask me about it.
So it's conversation starters.
Exactly, yeah. So, and that's the point of this is what you're good at. Also, Gallup defines weakness as not your bottom 4 to 7. Weakness is anything that gets in the way of success. So, can your bottom 4 or 7 get in the way of success because you are not really good at them? Of course they can. However, number 2 is positivity for me. Positivity, and my positivity can get in the way of success because, just to give an example, if I come in and I am Mr. Positive and there's somebody having a bad day, I don't want them to not feel their bad day. My positivity can actually rub them the wrong way. So it's things like that.
Can it get in the way as well of like seeing a looming crisis? You're like, I'm sure it's going to work itself out, that sort of thing.
Of course, there's reality as well. I don't want to live in Barbie world. I don't want to live with Ken and all them. I have to be cognizant of my surroundings and know I can be positive.
Yeah.
But if it's coming off the wrong way or it's giving the wrong results, maybe I have to just tone it down a bit, and I can. So that's really what Clifton Strengths is about.
So it can also be about preferences. Like you mentioned, somebody coming into a meeting and wanting the meeting to be this way, and the employees aren't on the same page. Knowing that can prevent you from devoting too much time to this and ignoring your employees' interests and needs and desires. Right?
Well, exactly. So, pie in the sky world, if I have a team of 5 people and I'm the manager of them, I would actually make meetings based upon their strengths.
Oh,
so if I have a woo, my number 3 is woo. Okay. I love talking to people.
You got to say what that is, because people associate that with.
Woo is not, sometimes people...
It's not the pseudoscientific.
And some people take woo as like, I'm wooing the opposite sex.
Oh.
It's that way as well. And I never want to say things like that, because when you're a woo, it's people. There's no gender specificity. There's no age or anything. In fact, we'll just read their definition. People exceptionally talented in the woo theme love and the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. They derive satisfaction from breaking the ice and making a connection with someone. It might be superficial in nature at first, but it's that connection. It's that hey, you're a new person. I want to know what you're about and where you come from and what's going on. I like to tell people that I'm not the creepy guy staring at you at the airport. It's me looking at you, and I'm like thinking to myself, interesting. Where is that family flying to? Where are they coming from? What's their dynamic? It interests me. A woo is like that. So a woo, you're gonna want, if you have a woo on your team, you say, hey, Mike, I saw one of your strengths is woo. I want you to run the next meeting and do it any way you want. Here are the strengths of your fellow employees. I want you to just go ahead and do it. Now, if I have an employee that's all strategic and they don't really like talking in front of people, but they have analytical as one of their strengths, I might go, hey, listen, why don't you bring in the charts. This is what I want to talk about. This is what I want the team to talk about. Why don't you organize the data or whatever. It's just, again, putting people in positions of success because it will make them happier if you do that. So why not take this data and utilize it to make them happier?
Yeah. So let's talk about another inventory thing. You mentioned DISC.
Yeah.
And this has all these different strengths. DISC is organized around four main things. What are they? How can DISC help you out with stuff? And is it compatible with the Clifton Strengths, or is it just capturing alternate dimensions of things?
I think it's that. I think when you get to the DISC and the Meyers-Briggs in this, it all captures a facet, if you will. Okay. We're all diamonds, right? And it's one more facet of that diamond that it's capturing. As far as DISC, not a lot is done in the organization with it. Okay. I know I'm an I, full through and through. But I've heard, and you said something pretty fascinating, usually DISC only comes up in the workplace. Like, in my experience.
As opposed to like Myers-Briggs.
We're using it in all sorts of, like my Myers-Briggs is and again, I'll speak to what it is. Mine is ENFP. Okay. So I'm an extrovert, I'm intuitive, I'm a feeling, perceiving. So definitely a relationship builder in CliftonStrengths. So they do mesh really well. And my DISC, I'm an I. So really all three of these things, it shows a facet, but it really speaks to the person. I haven't had anybody who's taken this or Myers-Briggs or DISC and go, that's not me.
Yeah.
They really look at it like, wow, they captured me pretty well.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting in that regard. So with DISC and with Myers-Briggs as well, I would always preface it, this is not who you are. It is an inventory of a part of you, of a piece of you, but it doesn't make Greg, Do
you find with the workers that you're doing this with that many of them are surprised by the results that they get, where they're like, I kind of see that, but there's no way I would have said that about myself before taking this?
So what's great is this. I'll give you two little quick stories.
Okay.
One is you're right. They're surprised, like, I didn't think I was this. What's great about, I'll just say CliftonStrengths, is they have a detailed, if you will, 5-paragraph analysis of why woo is 3.
Right, yeah.
But what's great is it's customized to the person. A person with a woo of 1, if there's a first strength, and a woo of 3, their paragraphs are different. Because as you get from 1 to 34, those strengths deplete in strength, if you will.
So just to focus on the Clifton one, does that also, you mentioned you've got like a top 10.
Yeah.
It's not going to change the paragraph if your woo is going from 1 to 3 if you happen to have a whole bunch of other things in that top 10, right? It'll still be the same paragraph for the 3. But you would look at things a bit differently?
No, they actually, the descriptive words are different.
Oh,
They actually look at the paragraph. It is different because it's, even like your top 5 is you.
Yeah.
It's like a 1 woo versus a 3 woo. I guess, it's a 9 versus an 8 or something.
That makes it sound like the results that you're getting for CliftonStrengths are much more complex and robust than they would be, say, for a DISC profile.
Yeah,
or maybe even the
so.
Myers-Briggs or some of the other inventories that are out there. You're clearly centering things around that. Is it because you view it as the superior tool?
Man, am I going to get in trouble for any Myers-Briggs or DISC people?
Well, they won't like it.
Yeah, they won't like it. I truly believe in those other...
It's up to them to make it better, right?
Yeah, exactly. I truly believe in both of those. And I really... And like you said, there's so many other assessments out there. Just because we focused on this one and then those other 2 are here sporadically.
Yeah.
I just love the research that Gallup has done. It's 80 plus years worth. I love... They even have a technical document of all how they do the research, and if you want to know anything about what they do with it, I can actually hand that to people and go.
So they're quite transparent.
They really are. System, yeah, and not that DISC or Myers-Briggs, maybe they are, but I just haven't asked the question. Whereas right now, I could hand you a packet about all of the data and how they use it and what they do and everything. And so I really liked this because of how deep it went. It really gave you words to what people were thinking. Like, I really love people and I really love helping people. What is that even called? Well, Clifton calls it empathy. Clifton calls it this or that. I love that they don't call it a weakness if you're this way. It's middle themes and it's lower themes. It's never a weakness.
Or a deficit.
It's not a deficit. I can bring input up.
Now, do people, when they're getting their results, so Clifton's not calling it that, do people bring that to their reading and they're like, oh crap, I thought I was good at this, but it's like number 28. What's going on?
What I like to do is this. So I like to tease. My way of delivering a workshop, I think humor is the best medicine any way you can go. I mean, some people would love a serious workshop. That's just not who I am. But anybody who has empathy at 34, I just say, why do you hate people? Do you want to talk about it? And I tell them that, and it's joking, of course, because one thing that they do specify is there are no labels. All strengths are neutral, and they really harp on that. And I make sure that the person laughed as well. Then I bring up, listen.
So it's not a moral inventory.
No,
right? It's not about ethical development or things
no.
like that. If there is going to be moral or ethical development, it'll be in terms of figuring out how you use your strengths to relate to other people in different ways and stuff like that.
So that 34 empathy, I just tell them, listen, could you 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, could you become a CNA and work in a geriatric facility and change people and do whatever this elderly population needs? Could you do that 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week? And they're like, most of the time they're like, I could never do that. I'm like, do you still care about those people? Oh yeah, I hope they're okay. Yeah, but empathy goes a little bit step further. And it's not that you're a bad person or you don't care about them. You're just not doing that job. You're not doing what it takes.
Now, you mentioned, and this is something that came up when we were in the LEAP workshop that you were leading this summer. Over the course of people's lives, these strengths will often change as things get prioritized or deprioritized. So is that part of why they don't want younger people taking the exact same inventory because they're not quite as fixed? Or I mean that would kind of track to things that we know in moral psychology and in ethics about how much we can actually say about younger people as opposed to 25 and up.
I mean, I think it is definitely about not the pigeonholing somebody into who we think they are because of this assessment. But what Gallup will say is if you take it 10 years apart, you're never definitely 100%. You're never really I'm never going to have input in my top 10. It just won't happen. I could take it when I'm 70.
What do you mean input?
So I'm sorry. I'm referring back to my number 34 is input.
Okay.
So 34, no matter who it is or what they have.
I thought you meant that like you couldn't decide them.
Gotcha. Okay. No. My number 34 is input. Input will never become my top 10 miraculously. Now, are there exceptions to the rule? I think there are outliers. For instance, we had somebody in yesterday's workshop that she worked for corporate America. And she was always afraid to start her own business. Well, last year she did. And her top 10 changed a little bit. 3 of them went out of her top 10 and went to 11, 12, and 15.
So still important.
But it wasn't in the top 10. It was in her supporting themes, if you will. But really 11, 12, and 15 are still, you can still do them. But what we discussed and what I told her was, I think for the corporate world, where kind of you are told how you should be and what you should be and what you're doing, and you may have to bring some strengths up to work what you have to do. When you moved to be autonomous and your own boss, you found that some of your other strengths were more necessary and maybe more natural. And so that made sense to her. It's like, well, that was a major change. I mean, you went from corporate to your own business.
I had something like that happen going from being a traditional academic and then having my own business. The biggest thing was getting comfortable with asking people for money, right?
Oh, I bet.
Which some people never have problems with, but when you're in a situation where what you're going to get is very, very clearly defined, as opposed to having to do salesmanship.
Yeah.
There's some discomfort, let's say, that has to be dealt with. Nowadays, I don't really have any problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't know what strength, if any of that would fall under, but it's definitely a change in personality.
Yeah.
And I could think that, so there could be things that have to do with like the transition in your role, but also maybe life events. When people go through a divorce, does that change their strengths at all? Or?
Well, it could. I mean, they would have to like look at it where, hey, I took my strength thing 10 years ago or whatever, and now going through a divorce is hard. I could see it change. For instance,
there's no guarantee.
No, there's no guarantee. But like, let's just say, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but a wife loses a husband, whether through divorce or death.
Okay, yeah.
And he was being stereotypical. He was the finance person in the house.
Okay,
he did the bills, he took care of the money,
yeah.
and she did whatever she needed to do for the household. They just had their separate roles,
right?
And the two didn't mix. That being the case, now she has to be the financial person in the household. She has to know where the checkbook is, how to balance it.
Yeah.
And that was something she was never used to. Well, now let's just say one of those strengths, whatever that would be for her, was way down in the high 20s. She may have to bring it up whether she likes it or not.
Yeah.
And that could be because of that life event.
Yeah, and you can imagine similar things in terms of like, often in couples, there's one who's more the planner. We're going to go out and do this sort of thing. Then you don't have the couple, and now you got to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
Or just do nothing.
Or just do nothing, and then you realize right away, like, wow, I miss this person. I miss what that person brought.
That raises another really interesting thing. So we all have different strengths, and you've talked about teams. So let's just keep it as a workplace team. Somebody gets fired, somebody gets sick and leaves, somebody moves on to a better position, and you're like, oh man, we can hire somebody to fill in, but this person who showed up, it's not quite, the team isn't working the way that it used to. It would be because there are some of these strengths are lacking that person was supplying, right? So maybe in hiring this could play some role, or?
That's a great question. So one thing, when I went through the coaching certification to go through all this stuff, the one thing they did say was this should be an informational piece.
Don't hire on the basis of
hire and fire should never be. Now, could it be that the job that you're hiring for is really relationship based? Like you're not going to want to hire maybe a salesperson that all they do is strategic thinking, but they can never talk to the client. It could be an informational piece that could be like, hey, well, let's add that into the factors that we look at, but it should never be, we don't like this person because they don't have this strength.
Yeah. That, I think, going back to the business ethics thing, was one of the worries about these sorts of inventories, that they could be used. Well, and you could also talk about in terms of so hiring and firing, very, very final stuff, right?
Yeah.
But promotion or providing opportunities, you're not the right sort, so why would we send you on this seminar? It's not really in your wheelhouse. But I mean, if you adopt this sort of approach and you say, people may not have this as their strength, but we give them some training or we give them some experiences, maybe we can bring these strengths up, right?
Yeah, in the hiring and firing thing, I know that's final, but if you want your team to work with who you have, you really want to, putting them in positions of success is the main deal. So it's looking at somebody who is doing a job and they're miserable, but you find out their strengths are over here. Why not be giving them tasks that you have to do that utilize those strengths more? Again, engagement goes up, happier coming to work. Whereas what we like to say is, what we see is that people come over to the manufacturing world on the floor, direct manufacturing employees.
Right.
They usually are coming here for extrinsic motivational factors. I need a paycheck.
Yeah,
I might get some accolades.
I think that's the case for most
of that stuff. But really, it's.
I can tell you that's definitely the case for ethics training.
I bet. But then I'm always thinking, how do we move them to intrinsically be motivated? Because once it becomes Once you can get
Yeah,
them
yeah.
really motivated within here, they tend to stay longer. So I give you, for instance, one new hire that I walked through a new hire orientation with.
Yeah.
He was happy to be this type of welder and to do what he was doing
Okay.
because he has friends in the military, and what he was doing was actually going on a vehicle to help them against the explosive devices that sometimes they ran in, adding plates or whatever.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
He thought about it intrinsically, like, this could help save a family member.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so it's one of those things where if you can be like I tell people that Polaris is a big contract with Capco. I'll tell them, listen, you run Polaris parts, right? Well, yeah. I said, wouldn't it be interesting to walk into a Polaris dealership and just look under the hood and go, I made that part. I made that part. I made that part.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you if you find pride in your work, whereas if you're just taking the part, putting it in, taking it off, I mean, yeah, it could get the extrinsic motivation will die. They could give you $100 an hour, and how long it will last?
So let's wrap up here with thinking about companies then. So some companies clearly don't care about that sort of stuff.
No.
And in business ethics, there's something that's called the business case for business ethics, right?
Okay.
Which is namely that why should you do things that are ethical? Well, it's going to be better for the bottom line. And it's debatable whether that's really the case. Sometimes it does turn out that way, sometimes it doesn't. And we don't just want to say, well, don't worry about that at all. Only worry about, these ideals and stuff like that, because you're not going to get any buy-in doing that, right? So companies, workplaces, we could think about academic institutions if they wanted to do this. The case here is that by actually incorporating this or other inventories, they can get more buy-in, they can retain people, they can have a more harmonious workplace, they can promote human development, and it doesn't have to be either bottom line or ethics. It can be something that brings both of them together, right?
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. If it is your bottom line you're worried about, I mean,
If it's only thing,
those floor employees are what makes your bottom line happen.
Yeah.
And if you don't see that, and all you see is, we can always replace them with another one.
Yeah.
Well, you just maybe lost $15,000 having to hire and having them through the training process when you could have just done what was needed.
Well, and it
with
has
them.
an add-on effect too. When people see that you don't care about this employee, then they can be like, well, they probably don't care about me either.
Exactly. And then you have a culture like that.
Yeah.
And once it's a culture, then it's hard to change.
Yeah. That was just the camera dying, but
that's okay.
Overheating, but we'll still have the voice and stuff like that. But
okay.
Thanks very much for this interview.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was great.
I think this will be very informative for my viewers.
Good.